Welcome to Global Retail TV. Our Retail Facts guest today is a retail expert and the author of one of the famous retail books in the world, Mr. Peter Smith. Peter, it's good to have you here with us today.
Hi, Jalal. This is Peter Smith, the author of The Sales Minute. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate here today with Global Retail TV.
Peter, can you tell us a little bit about your retail background?
I spent most of the first half of my career working in retail. That included both shopping malls and also higher-end, higher-profile retailers such as Tiffany & Company, where I spent about 8 years. The second half of my career was selling to retailers. So retailers were and continue to be my customer, and of course, writing about the retail experience in my books and also in my columns for National Jeweler and the Jewelry Book, where again I write about the retail experience and in particular about people. So despite not having worked in retail for many years, I've never been less than aware that that is my customer, and so I've got this what I will call a very healthy obsession with retailers and the retail experience.
Sales Minute. What a wonderful guide to retail staff and people who would like to learn more about retail. How did you come up with an idea to develop this unique book?
I had written 2 books previously, Hiring Squirrels, about how to hire salespeople, and Sell Something, about the psychology of sales. For the Sales Minute, I wanted a book that could be very accessible on a day in and day out basis, with tips that could be quickly accessed and put into play that day. Part of that was the fact that so few people, it seems to me now, read books, or at least on a regular basis. And so I wanted something, again, that would be very accessible. It could be opened on a random page. And that tip, which takes less than a minute really to read, could be put into play that day. So that's where the idea came from.
If we ask you, Peter, to pick up the top 5 tips from the 101 in your book, which ones will you recommend any salesperson to learn and practice at the workplace?
Yeah, so the first tip, I would say, because I think it is in many respects the foundation, is that a great experience means someone bought something. We very often hear, particularly from less effective salespeople, that they had a great experience with the customer, that they believe the customer is going to come back, and things of that nature. And ultimately, the metric ought to be that that customer actually buys something. So that is really the most practical of pointers that I can give, and the one that I would start with and say, a satisfied customer and a happy salesperson means that not only did we provide the warm greeting and the smile and utilize body language, in particular the way we ought to do so, but that ultimately that customer walked out having purchased something. Right, so the next tip is really a combination of tips. One is don't spend from your own pocket. And the other is sort of the other side of that coin, is that customers actually enjoy spending more. So, at this stage, there have been numerous studies that show that when customers in fact have a better experience when they pay more for a product. That's not more for a poor quality product, but more for a good quality product and a luxury brand. They assume in doing so that the quality is better, and wearing that piece of jewelry, the watch, the item of clothing, the shoes, etc., actually makes them feel better because they spent more for it. So the salesperson's job is really to not put their value proposition onto the price of an item, but to communicate the value proposition, right? Not to spend from their own pocket, but to communicate the value proposition, because ultimately what the best value is for a customer is to come away from the retail experience having felt that they did the right thing, that was in fact the most important thing for them, is they did the right thing. Yeah, so the next point is the paradox of choice. And, I'd start by saying instinct suggests that the customer is better served by having more options, when in fact, instinct couldn't be more wrong. In fact, the customer is better served when we curate the options and they in fact have less options. So again, we have an abundance of research that shows when we are faced with too many options, too many choices, our brain, which is consumed with many important things like keeping us safe and finding food and looking for an appropriate partner, our brain will actually shut down. If we give too many choices, too many options, our brain will in fact shut down. And that's why we see customers oftentimes leaving the retail shop, because the customer just is being asked to do too much thinking. So there's no absolute correct number of options, but my view is once the salesperson has done her job, understanding the customer motivations, that 3 options is best, right? 3. That fits with our need to have control over our decisions, which is important from the time we are babies, while not overly taxing our brain. So the paradox of choice is really, let's think about things in 3s after we have done our job, understanding what the customer's motivation is. Yeah, so the next point number 4 I would have is pricing psychology. And I think I love this one because it is so very, very simple. And this is really what it boils down to. How we say price, and in fact, how we write price as well and print price, really matters much more than we think. So for instance, if we take a random price of, let's say, $1,650, be it dollars, pounds, whatever your currency is, $1,650 is going to sound very, very different to a customer than $1,650, right? So $1,650 is going to sound very different than $1,650. And what it boils down to really is just the amount of syllables in a price. So if you can phrase a price and frame a price in such a way that it has fewer syllables, it is going to be much better received than if we have a price framed with more syllables. So just on that number that I gave, the $1,650 has 10, 11 syllables, $1,650. So $1,650 is about 10 or 11 syllables. But $1,650, which is the same communication, $1,650 has about 4 or 5 syllables. So that's really the difference there. As you state the price, practice saying the price with fewer syllables. And then the one thing I would add is never apologize for a price. Say it confidently and with a smile on your face, and then stop. Don't qualify. Don't make excuses for it. Just simply state the price and leave it at that. Yeah, so touching the product is hugely important. It's a very different experience than visual or sort of anything to do with the optics or the narrative, right? So if I show it to you or if I tell you about it, that is fundamentally different than if I put it in your hand or if I get you to try that product on. So what happens is touching activates a higher level brain function designed for recognition and reaction. And what happens is when the customer gets the product on, unless it is a product that doesn't feel, if it feels sort of icky to the customer, if it doesn't feel good to the customer, but once it feels good to the customer, it triggers an emotion to do with ownership. So what happens is once the customer tries it on, they are infinitely more reluctant to give it up than had they not tried it on. Had you just simply showed it and talked about it, but they hadn't tried on the product, it is much easier for the customer to just sort of move on to something else. So whenever you can get a customer to touch product, meaning to try it on, you're going to be very, very well rewarded for doing so far more often than if you were not to do it. And part of that is a psychological principle called regret avoidance. We don't want to regret not having done something. And again, if we've connected with it because we touched it and tried it on, it's much more difficult to walk away from it.
Has the Sales Minute been developed for a specific retail sector?
Yeah, so the book is designed for really for retail environments where the salesperson is reasonably expected to influence the sale, right? So this is not really, a Sales Minute is not really designed for a self-service environment. It's not really designed for a significantly off-price environment where there tends to be a lot of self-service anyway, or at best, minimal service. But in any kind of a retail experience, any kind of luxury environment, clothing, shoes, jewelry, timepieces, etc., any kind of a better quality environment where the salesperson is expected to influence that purchase. That's really who this book is aimed at.
I would like to congratulate you on this high-value book and the information shared in today's show. Can you please remind our audience how they can get in touch with you or how they can get a copy of the Sales Minute?
Yeah, so people can get a copy of the Sales Minute. It's available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and pretty much most of the major book sites. And then if people want to reach out to me directly, they can do so on LinkedIn. That's Peter Smith. Or my email is the retailsmiths, SMITHS, @gmail.com. The retailsmiths @gmail.com.
Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure talking retail with you.
So thank you very much for having me. I hope a couple of these tips were interesting to your listeners. And I wish you all a good day. Thank you again for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Retail Facts with Peter Smith, a retail expert and the author of the Sales Minute. Thank you for watching.